Stand in the middle of Times Square on any given Tuesday, and you are surrounded by more human beings per square foot than almost anywhere else on Earth. 49 million tourists pass through this city every single year. 8.5 million people call it home, speaking over 800 languages between them, making New York City the most linguistically diverse place in the history of human civilization. Not the most diverse in America, not the most diverse in the Western world, but in the history of human civilization. Now rewind 400 years. This same island, this exact strip of land, 13 miles long and barely 2 miles wide, is home to perhaps a few thousand people living in longhouses beside streams that no longer exist, hunting forests that have been buried under 60 feet of steel and concrete and ambition. No skyline, no harbor cranes, no yellow cabs, no noise except the wind off the river and the birds in the trees. The island the Lenape people call Mannahatta, the island of many hills. What happened in between? That is the question this video exists to answer. Because the distance between that quiet island and the city that exists today is not just 4 centuries of history. It is one of the most violent, creative, corrupt, brilliant, devastating, and ultimately extraordinary journeys any place on Earth has ever made. From a Dutch trading post nobody wanted to the capital of the modern world. From a backwater colony on the edge of an empire to the city that every other city measures itself against. For most of that journey, we have had to rely on paintings, engravings, and the written accounts of people who stood on these streets and tried to describe what they saw. But now, using advanced AI reconstruction technology, we can take those original images, those faded paintings of 17th century New Amsterdam, those Civil War era photographs, those turn-of-the-century engravings of a city exploding upward, and bring them back to life as they may have actually appeared. The crowds, the chaos, the construction, the skyline rising year by year like something the world had never seen before. Sit back. The island is waiting. Let's go back to where it all began. The year is 1609. An English explorer named Henry Hudson sails into the mouth of a wide, calm river on behalf of the Dutch East India Company. He is looking for a shortcut to Asia. He does not find one. What he finds instead is a harbor so deep, so naturally sheltered, so perfectly positioned for trade that it will eventually become the most commercially important body of water in the Western world. Hudson sails about 150 miles upriver before he realizes the passage he is looking for does not exist. He turns around. He goes home. But the Dutch do not forget what he saw. The people already living here have been on this land for at least 11,000 years. The Lenape, the original people, move with the seasons across a landscape of dense forests, tidal marshes, and freshwater streams. Mannahatta is not wilderness to them. It is a managed, inhabited, deeply understood place. They know every stream, every hill, every oyster bed along the shoreline. The harbor the Dutch are so excited about is simply home. In 1624, the Dutch West India Company established a permanent settlement at the southern tip of the island. They call it New Amsterdam. It is not impressive. A cluster of wooden buildings, a small fort that is never quite finished, a windmill, a church. Maybe 300 people. The company is not interested in building a city. They are interested in beaver pelts. The fur trade is the entire reason New Amsterdam exists, and for the first decade of its life, the settlement is essentially a corporate outpost, a loading dock for animal skins to be shipped back to Europe. Then in 1626, something happens that will become one of the most famous transactions in history. Peter Minuit, the director of the colony, purchases the island of Manhattan from the Lenape for 60 guilders worth of trade goods. The popular story says this amounts to $24. The reality is more complicated. The Lenape concept of land ownership is fundamentally different from the European one, and what they understand themselves to be agreeing to is not what the Dutch believe they are buying. It is the first of many misunderstandings between the people of this island and the people who arrive on ships believing it belongs to whoever can put a price on it. New Amsterdam grows slowly and chaotically. By the 1640s, there are perhaps 500 people here, and they are already arguing about everything. The colony has a reputation across the Dutch Empire as a difficult, ungovernable place. When a census is taken, the residents speak 18 different languages. Even at the very beginning, New York cannot help being New York. The settlement's most consequential act of infrastructure was completed in 1653. Facing the threat of English encroachment from the north, the Dutch built a wall across the width of the island, a wooden palisade designed to keep enemies out. The wall gives its name to the street that runs along it. That street still exists today. It is called Wall Street. The next time the global financial system shakes and every news channel in the world focuses on that one address, remember, it was named after a fence built by colonists who were terrified of their neighbors. But the English are not coming from the north. They are coming from the sea. In 1664, 4 English warships sailed into the harbor and pointed their cannons at the fort. The Dutch governor, Peter Stuyvesant, wants to fight. His own citizens refuse. They have no faith in a company that has given them so little and demanded so much. Without firing a single shot, New Amsterdam surrenders. The Dutch colony is over, but what replaces it is about to become something the Dutch, or anyone else, could never have imagined. The English renamed the city almost immediately. New Amsterdam becomes New York, named after the Duke of York, the man King Charles II gives the colony to as a gift, the way you might hand someone a coat you no longer need. The Dutch residents stay. The Dutch street names stay. The Dutch farms stay. The English simply arrive on top of everything that already exists and declare it theirs. It is a pattern this city will see repeated in different forms for the next 3 centuries. Under British rule, New York begins to grow in a way it never did under the Dutch. The English are less interested in fur and more interested in trade, and the harbor that Henry Hudson noticed in 1609 turns out to be one of the finest natural ports on the entire Atlantic seaboard. Ships from the Caribbean bring sugar and rum. Ships from Britain bring manufactured goods. Ships from the American colonies bring grain and timber. By the early 1700s, New York was one of the busiest trading ports in the British Empire, and the merchants who control that trade were becoming very wealthy very fast. The city expands northward from its original foothold at the island's tip. Streets are laid out, some planned, most not. The population doubles, then doubles again. By 1700, there were about 5,000 people in New York. By 1750, there were 13,000. By 1775, on the eve of revolution, there were 25,000, making New York the second largest city in all of British North America, behind only Philadelphia. But wealth and population create something else alongside prosperity. They create tension. The merchants of New York grow powerful enough to start resenting the empire that controls them. Taxes arrive from London, taxes on sugar, on stamps, on tea, and every one of them lands on a city that is generating enormous wealth and seeing very little of it return. The phrase "no taxation without representation" is not abstract philosophy in New York. It is a business complaint made by men who understand exactly how much money is moving through this harbor and exactly how much of it is disappearing across the Atlantic. Then, in 1765, something happens on a street in Lower Manhattan that changes the course of American history. A group of New Yorkers storms the home of a British officer and destroys it. The target is the Stamp Act, the British law requiring a royal stamp and a fee on every piece of printed paper in the colonies. Newspapers, legal documents, even playing cards. The resistance in New York is fierce enough that Britain is forced to repeal the act the following year. The colonists have discovered something important, that organized defiance works. They will not forget it. When the American Revolution began in earnest in 1776, New York became the most strategically important city on the continent. George Washington knows it. The British know it. In August of 1776, the largest British military force ever assembled in North America, 32,000 soldiers and 10,000 sailors, landed on Long Island and drove Washington's army off it in a single battle. New York falls to the British within weeks. Washington retreats north with what remains of his forces. The city the Revolution most needed is the first major city the Revolution loses. The British occupied New York for 7 years. For loyalists, Americans who remained faithful to the crown, the city became a refuge. For the 11,500 American prisoners of war held on British prison ships in the harbor, it became a death sentence. More Americans die on those ships than in every battle of the entire Revolutionary War combined. Their bodies are buried in mass grave on the shores of Brooklyn. A monument stands there today. Most people who pass it have no idea what it marks. In 1783, the British finally left. George Washington rides back into New York in triumph. 6 years later, the city becomes the first capital of the United States of America, and Washington is inaugurated as the nation's first president on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street, the same street named after the Dutch fence, now hosting the birth of a republic. But the capital will not stay here long, and the reason why shapes everything that comes next. The capital moves to Philadelphia in 1790, then to Washington, D.C. in 1800. Politicians decide New York is too commercial, too chaotic, too difficult to control. They are right on all 3 counts, and it does not matter in the slightest, because what New York loses in political status, it more than compensates for with something no act of Congress can manufacture: geography, ambition, and an almost inhuman appetite for growth. In 1817, construction begins on a project so audacious that most serious people thought it was insane. A canal, 363 miles long, cutting through the wilderness of upstate New York, designed to connect the Hudson River to the Great Lakes and open the entire interior of the continent to trade through the port of New York. Governor DeWitt Clinton pushes it through against fierce opposition. His enemies call it Clinton's folly, Clinton's ditch. They say it cannot be done. In 1825, the Erie Canal opened. It is the engineering marvel of its age, and it transforms New York overnight from an important port into the undisputed commercial capital of North America. Goods from the interior of a continent, grain, timber, livestock, raw materials, now flow east through a single channel and out through a single harbor. That harbor is New York. Within a decade, the city handles more cargo than Boston, Baltimore, and Philadelphia combined. The folly becomes the foundation. The population explodes. In 1800, New York had 60,000 people. By 1850, it had over 500,000. By 1880, it had nearly 2 million. And the overwhelming majority of that growth comes not from the children of people already here, but from people arriving on ships with nothing but what they can carry. They come from Ireland first. Between 1845 and 1852, the Great Famine killed approximately 1 million people in Ireland and forced another million to flee. Most of them end up in New York. They arrive starving, sick, and desperate into a city that does not particularly want them. They are crammed into the tenements of the Lower East Side, buildings designed for one family housing 4, 5, sometimes 6. Entire families sleeping in single rooms with no windows, no ventilation, no running water. Disease moves through these buildings like fire through timber. Cholera, typhus, tuberculosis. In the worst years of the 1850s, New York's infant mortality rate was among the highest of any city in the developed world. 1 in 5 children born in the tenement districts does not live to see their first birthday. Then the Germans come. Then the Italians. Then, from the 1880s onward, Jewish refugees fleeing persecution in Eastern Europe arrived in numbers that staggered the imagination. Between 1880 and 1924, approximately 17 million people passed through the port of New York. 17 million. The receiving station at Ellis Island, opened in 1892, processes as many as 5,000 immigrants in a single day. They come from Poland, Russia, Hungary, Greece, Syria, China. They come speaking languages no one around them understands, carrying traditions no one around them recognizes, holding onto identities that the city will simultaneously celebrate and attempt to erase. The neighborhood they land in, the Lower East Side of Manhattan, becomes the most densely populated place on Earth. In 1900, the 10th ward of the Lower East Side housed 700 people per acre. For comparison, modern Manhattan averages about 70 people per acre. These people are living in conditions that an investigative journalist named Jacob Rears photographed in 1890 and published in a book called How the Other Half Lives. The images shock the city's comfortable classes into a confrontation with what their prosperity actually costs. Theodore Roosevelt, then a New York City police commissioner, reads Rears's book in a single night and shows up at his office the next morning to demand action. That meeting sets in motion a chain of urban reform that will define New York's political character for the next century. But the city was not only suffering, it was also building. In 1883, after 14 years of construction and the deaths of at least 27 workers, the Brooklyn Bridge opened. It is the longest suspension bridge in the world. It connects Manhattan to Brooklyn across the East River in a single elegant arc of steel cable and granite towers. On opening day, 150,300 people walk across it. P.T. Barnum, worried that the bridge cannot possibly hold, leads 21 elephants across it to prove it can. The bridge does not move. And then in 1886, a gift arrived from France. Standing 305 feet tall on a small island in the harbor, the same harbor where those British prison ships once held American prisoners of war, the Statue of Liberty raises her torch over the water. For the millions of immigrants who sail past her on their way to Ellis Island, she is the first thing they see of America. She is not yet the symbol she will become. That takes time. That takes the weight of all those arrivals, all those stories, all those people who looked up at her from the deck of a ship and felt, for the first time, that they might survive what they had survived. By 1898, the 5 boroughs, Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Staten Island, consolidated into a single city. Greater New York is born. Population, 3-4 million people. The largest city in the Western Hemisphere. But the forces that built it, the poverty, the inequality, the labor exploitation, the political corruption, are about to collide with a new century in ways nobody is prepared for. The 20th century does not arrive in New York gradually. It arrives all at once, like a freight train through a station, and the city grabs hold of it with both hands. In 1900, New York was already the largest city in the Western Hemisphere, but it is still, in its bones, a 19th century city, horse-drawn, low-rise, gaslit, and governed by one of the most spectacularly corrupt political machines in American history. Tammany Hall, the Democratic Party organization that has controlled New York politics since the 1790s, operates on a simple principle. Votes are bought, contracts are sold, and the men at the top get rich. The city's police force is so thoroughly on the peril of organized crime that brothels and gambling dens operate openly on the same blocks as churches and schools. Everyone knows. Nobody stops it. This is just how New York works. And yet, simultaneously, New York is becoming something no city has ever been before. The technology arrives fast, and it arrives everywhere at once. Electric streetcars replace horse-drawn carriages. Electric lights replace gas lamps. In 1904, the first subway line opened, running from City Hall up through Manhattan, and overnight the geography of the city reorganized itself around it. Working people can now live miles from where they work. Neighborhoods that were farmland a decade ago fill with tenements and storefronts within years. The subway does not just move people. It manufactures the modern city. And then the buildings begin to go up. The Flathead Building rises in 1902 at the junction of Broadway and Fifth Avenue. 22 stories of steel and limestone, shaped like the prow of a ship, standing at what was then considered a dangerously windy intersection. Crowds gather to watch women's skirts blow upward in the gusts that funnel around its narrow front. Police officers are posted to move them along. The slang term they use for loitering men, 23 skidoo, enters the American language and is still used today. Then the Woolworth Building in 1913, then 40 Wall Street, then the Chrysler Building in 1930, its Art Deco crown assembled in secret inside the building and raised through the roof at the last moment to beat a rival skyscraper to the title of world's tallest building. Then, in 1931, the Empire State Building. 102 stories, completed in just 410 days. Built during the Great Depression by 3,400 workers, many of them Mohawk ironworkers from the Carnawake Reserve in Canada, whose extraordinary lack of fear at heights on steel beams earns them a reputation that brings them back to New York for every major skyscraper project for the next half-century. The Empire State Building goes up so fast that at its peak, 4.5 floors are completed every single week. But while the skyline rises, the streets below are convulsing. On March 25, 1911, a fire broke out on the upper floors of the Triangle Shirtwaist factory on Washington Place in Greenwich Village. The workers inside, mostly young immigrant women, many of them Jewish and Italian teenagers, find the exits locked. The factory owners have locked the doors to prevent theft and unauthorized breaks. The fire escapes and collapses under the weight of fleeing workers. Within 18 minutes, 146 people are dead. Many of them jump from the 9th floor windows rather than burn. Bystanders on the street below watch them fall. The Triangle Fire is the deadliest workplace disaster in New York City history. It is also the moment that transforms American labor law. The outcry that follows forces New York State to pass 36 new workplace safety laws in 3 years. Frances Perkins, a young social reformer who witnesses the fire from the street, dedicates her life to labor reform as a direct result of what she sees that afternoon. She later becomes Franklin Roosevelt's Secretary of Labor, the first woman ever appointed to a U.S. cabinet position, and architects the New Deal legislation that reshapes American working life for generations. Then the Depression arrives. In October 1929, the stock market collapsed on Wall Street, the street named after a Dutch fence, which has by now become the engine of the global economy, and the world fell apart. New York, which has spent the 1920s in a frenzy of wealth, jazz, Prohibition-era speakeasies, and cultural explosion, wakes up in a city where a quarter of the workforce has no job. Breadlines stretch around blocks in the same neighborhoods where ticker-tape parades had celebrated returning heroes just years before. Shanty towns spring up in Central Park. New Yorkers call them Hoovervilles, after the president they blame. The city survives the Depression the way it survives everything, not cleanly, not without cost, but without stopping. And just as it begins to find its footing again, the world goes to war for the second time in 30 years, and New York becomes something it has never quite been before, the arsenal and the safe haven of the free world. Soldiers ship out from its piers. Refugees from Nazi Europe arrive at its docks. The United Nations, founded in 1945 in the belief that the world needs a place where nations can talk instead of fight, chooses New York as its home. It is not an accident. It is a recognition of what this city has always been, a place where the whole world already lives. But the war's end does not bring the peace the city expects. What comes next very nearly destroys it. In the years immediately after World War II, New York looks like it has won. Soldiers come home to ticker-tape parades down Broadway. The harbor is full. The factories are running. The city that housed the United Nations, that sent its sons to fight on 2 fronts, that kept producing while the world burned, this city feels, briefly, invincible. It is not. What happened to New York between 1950 and 1980 is one of the most dramatic urban collapses in the history of the developed world. And it happens not because of invasion, not because of fire, not because of plague, but because of decisions. Decisions made by powerful men sitting in offices, moving populations around a map the way you move pieces on a board, without ever asking the people on the squares what they want. Robert Moses is the most powerful unelected official in American history. Between the 1930s and the 1960s, he shaped New York more completely than any mayor, any governor, any president. He builds parks, bridges, highways, housing projects, over 600 miles of roads in New York alone. He is brilliant. He is also brutal. When Moses builds his highways, he routes them deliberately through the poorest neighborhoods, Black and Latino communities in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Harlem, demolishing 250,000 homes over his career and scattering communities that had taken generations to build. He designs the overpasses on his parkways too low for buses to pass under, so that poor people without cars cannot reach the public beaches he builds. He never writes this down. He never says it in public. But the measurements speak for themselves. And while Moses tears through the city with concrete, the middle class is leaving. The GI Bill gives returning veterans low-interest mortgages, but only for homes in the suburbs. The new highways Moses has built make the suburbs reachable. White families leave the city by the hundreds of thousands, drawn by cheaper housing, better schools, and a quiet that New York has never offered and never will. The tax base collapses. The schools deteriorate. The services decline, and the cycle accelerates. The worse the city gets, the faster people leave. By the 1970s, New York was in freefall. The city is essentially bankrupt. In 1975, it came within hours of defaulting on its debt, unable to pay its own municipal workers, unable to keep its hospitals open, unable to guarantee that the garbage will be collected or the fires put out. President Gerald Ford refuses to authorize a federal bailout. The New York Daily News runs the most famous headline in its history: Ford to city, drop dead. Ford does eventually provide assistance. But the headline captures the mood of a nation that has stopped believing in New York. The physical city reflects the financial one. The South Bronx, once a working-class neighborhood of apartment buildings and corner shops, burns. Not metaphorically, literally. Between 1970 and 1980, more than 40% of the South Bronx's housing stock was destroyed by fire. Some of it is arson by landlords collecting insurance on buildings they can no longer rent. Some of it is accidental, spreading through vacant buildings where the wiring has not been maintained in years. During the 1977 World Series, played at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, the ABC television cameras pan across the borough and catch buildings burning in the distance. The announcer Howard Cosell says, on national television, "Ladies and gentlemen, the Bronx is burning." 40 million people watch it happen from their living rooms. The crime follows the collapse. In 1990, New York recorded 2,245 murders in a single year, more than 6 people killed every single day. Central Park, the great democratic lungs of the city, is effectively off-limits after dark. Subway cars are covered from floor to ceiling in graffiti. Entire stations smell of urine and decay. Times Square, the crossroads of the world, is a concentrated district of pornography shops, drug dealing, and street crime that tourists are warned to avoid and locals learn to navigate with their eyes forward and their pace fast. And yet, in the South Bronx, in the very neighborhoods that are burning, something is being born. Young Black and Latino kids who have been abandoned by every institution, the schools, the government, the economy, create something from nothing. They take 2 turntables and a microphone into a community room in a housing project on Sedgwick Avenue, and they invent hip-hop. DJ Kool Herc, a Jamaican immigrant living in the Bronx, isolates the percussion break in a funk record and loops it. That moment, on August 11, 1973, at 1520 Sedgwick Avenue, is the birth of a musical form that will become the most commercially dominant genre on Earth within 30 years. The city is burning. The music is rising from the smoke. New York has been here before. It has been abandoned, occupied, bankrupted, burned. It always finds a way back. But the way back this time is going to require something the city has not tried in a very long time. A complete reinvention of what it believes it is for. The reinvention begins in the 1990s, and it is as dramatic as anything that has come before it. Crime falls, not slowly, not gradually. It collapses. Between 1990 and 2000, murders in New York dropped from 2,245 to 673, a 70% reduction in a single decade. The causes are debated by criminologists and politicians to this day. Policing strategies, economic recovery, demographic shifts, the fading of the crack epidemic, all of it plays a role. But the result is undeniable. The city that the whole world had written off as ungovernable, irredeemable, finished, that city comes back. Times Square, which in 1985 housed over 150 adult shops and peep shows, was by 1999 a family destination with a Disney store on the corner. The transformation is so complete, so fast, that longtime New Yorkers find it almost disorienting. The city they learn to survive is becoming a city people actively choose. Money arrives. Wall Street booms through the 1990s in a frenzy of technology stocks and financial innovation. Rents rise. Neighborhoods that were abandoned in the 1970s, Soho, Tribeca, Williamsburg in Brooklyn, are discovered by artists, then by professionals, then by developers, then by everyone else, in a cycle of gentrification that prices out the very people who made them worth discovering. The city gets safer, wealthier, cleaner, and in doing so, begins to lose some of the raw, unfinished quality that always made it extraordinary. This argument between the New York that was and the New York that is never fully resolves. It is still happening right now. Then the morning of September 11th, 2001. At 8:46 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 strikes the North Tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:03 a.m., United Airlines Flight 175 strikes the South Tower. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapses. At 10:28 a.m., the North Tower follows. In 102 minutes, the most recognizable skyline in the world has a hole in it. 2,977 people are dead. The cloud of ash and paper and pulverized concrete that rolls through the streets of Lower Manhattan on that morning coats the entire southern end of the island in gray. People walk uptown through it in silence, covered in the residue of what has just happened, not yet able to process what it means. New York grieves in a way that is entirely its own. Handwritten missing persons flyers go up on every surface within hours. Photographs of people last seen at their desks on the 87th floor. Makeshift memorials appear at every fire station, every police precinct, every street corner within sight of where the towers stood. The city that is famously too busy and too hard to be sentimental discovers, in those weeks, that it has been sentimental all along. It just needed a reason to show it. The city rebuilds. One World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower, rises on the same footprint, 1,776 feet tall, the number chosen deliberately. The National September 11 Memorial opened in 2011, its two vast reflecting pools sitting in the exact footprints of the towers, the names of the dead inscribed around their edges. On a clear day, standing at those pools, you can look up and see the new tower rising above you and understand what this city has chosen to believe about itself. The 21st century brings new challenges in new forms. Hurricane Sandy in 2012 floods the subway system, shuts down the stock exchange, and kills 43 people in New York City alone. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 hits New York harder than almost any city on Earth in its first wave. Refrigerator trucks parked outside hospitals to serve as temporary morgues. The streets of Manhattan silent in a way they have not been silent since before anyone alive was born. The city loses more than 32,000 people, and yet the people come back. The restaurants reopen. The subway runs. The arguments about rent and space and noise and who belongs here resume exactly as they always have, because that argument is not a sign of a city in trouble. It is the sound of a city alive. New York today is home to nearly 20 million in the greater metropolitan area. It remains the financial capital of the world, the cultural capital of the Western Hemisphere, and the place where more languages are spoken than anywhere else in human history. It is expensive beyond reason. It is crowded beyond comfort. It is loud, relentless, contradictory, and completely, irreducibly itself. That is not an accident. That is the entire story. Stand in Times Square again, where we started. Look at what surrounds you. The screens, the crowds, the 800 languages, the buildings that took 14 years to build and 102 minutes to destroy, and a generation to rebuild again. All of it sitting on a 13-mile island that a Dutch company once bought for 60 guilders and a collection of trade goods from a people who never believed land could be owned in the first place. New York has survived the erasure of its original inhabitants. It has survived colonial occupation and revolutionary war. It has survived the cholera and the typhus and the tuberculosis that moved through its tenements like a slow fire nobody could put out. It has survived bankruptcy, burning, and the day the sky fell. It has survived a pandemic that silenced its streets in a way nothing in 400 years had managed to do. Each time the prediction was the same. This time New York does not come back. Each time the prediction was wrong. The through line is not luck. It is not geography, though the harbor helps. It is not money, though the money matters. The through line is this. New York has always been full of people who had nowhere else to go. The Irish who fled famine. The Jews who fled pogroms. The Black Americans who fled the Jim Crow South in the Great Migration. The Puerto Ricans, the Dominicans, the Chinese, the Italians, the Greeks, the Bangladeshis, the Nigerians, the Mexicans. Every wave of people who arrived with nothing and needed the city to be what it always promised to be. A place where the past does not have to determine the future. A place where you can begin again. That is what New York has always been. Not a city that was built once and maintained. A city that is perpetually, violently, gloriously under construction. It has never been finished. It will never be finished. Every generation tears something down and puts something up in its place and argues furiously about whether that was the right decision, and then the next generation tears that down too. The argument is the city, the motion is the point. The Lenape called it Mannahatta, the island of many hills. Most of those hills are gone now, leveled by 4 centuries of development, but the island remains. And on it, in the middle of all that steel and noise and light, the most improbable collection of human beings ever assembled in one place is still doing what New Yorkers have always done. Surviving, building, arguing, creating, and refusing, absolutely refusing to be anywhere else. Thank you for watching. If this journey through the city that built the modern world stayed with you, hit the like button and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. And tell us in the comments, what city, what empire, what story do you want us to take you back to? We read every one. As always, we'll see you in the next.